Okay, I think we are good to go. As a quick disclaimer, I see that everybody has everybody has already muted their microphones. If there will be questions later on and a discussion later on as well, and if you feel like you want to ask me any questions during the talk, just write your question to the hashtag APT Game Generator channel here in this server and at me. So that's at Oak Warrior. So I will see your message and hopefully be able to answer it. Otherwise, welcome to the workshop. Now, this workshop is planned to be about 45 minutes. So that's going to be about 30 to 35 minutes of me talking. And at times also telling you what to do, in a way. Yes, it is still recording. Okay, everything is good. Then we will have a discussion later on as well. But just basically have a Google Doc or a notepad file open, because I do recommend you to write some stuff down, because I will urge you to apply some of the things I will be talking about to either your game project or projects, so to speak. And if you are in this channel right now, then either please mute your microphone or go into push to talk mode from Discord. And that's it for the intro. One moment, I need to clear my throat. And also, as a disclaimer, you will not be seeing my face right now in this talk. So just imagine my face, but you will be seeing it in the recording, because OBS has locked the camera device input. And without further ado, welcome. This talk is part of a talk series hosted by APT Game Generator and Tartu Science Park for the Be Big initiative. And this is the first talk of 3. You guys voted on what you would want to hear about. I proposed a topic about redesigning games, how to handle it, and how to keep your sanity. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. A few words about myself. My name is Ott. Hello, that's me. I make games for a living. Right now I'm engaged with Placeholder Gameworks, and we released Death and Taxes last year, and it did pretty well. Before that, I've been working in several places, but that is really not the topic of the workshop. I'm here to teach you a little bit about my own design processes and some design processes that are kind of considered standard in the industry, even though our industry doesn't have that many standards. And I also like to learn about making games a lot. So that means I talk to a lot of people who make games. I ask them how their processes work. I watch a lot of GDC talks, watch a lot of game development material generally, and here I am to provide you some of the knowledge that I have attained over the years. So without further ado, let's just get straight to it. Now, this is the part where I would ask you to open up your notepad and start taking notes if you feel like it's necessary. We're not going to go into the specifics yet, but soon we shall. So, what is game design anyway? I don't want to give like a specific sort of definition for it, but I would just want to say that it is the art of application. And you might ask, the application of what? The point is, game design is, well, the art of design set to game development. And in game development, you apply many things. You apply all of your skills that is required to make a game. It can be art, it can be writing, it can be coding, it can be production or business, all of the above. And game design is the art of the application of all of those. In game design, when you are designing a game, you invariably have to think about all of the aspects that go along with making the game, including the business part, actually. You need to know who you are making the game for, how you are making it, who is making it, and who is responsible for what. So when I am mentioning game design in the context I will be referring to it today, then I mostly mean applying certain skill sets to produce a game as an end product. Next step. Let's talk a little bit about what keeps people back from having a good design philosophy. I personally have kind of discovered that in the industry there are these three main prevailing things that keep people back from having good, refined design. And these are, first off, cynicism. Forgive the picture, this is just a funny picture of a statue of Diogenes, a Greek philosopher who is known to be a cynicist, but this is not the cynicism I'm talking about. I'm talking about modern, contemporary cynicism. If you are designing something, you should not be approaching it from a cynical perspective. Cynicism is going to stifle your creativity. It is going to give you a lot of prejudice towards yourself, mostly, and also towards others. So when you are designing a game, you should, kind of let go a little bit about your hostile prejudices, your mistrust towards, let's say, well, pretty much everything. Your mistrust towards potentially like publishers, your mistrust towards your coworkers, your teammates, everything. It is something that is simply counterintuitive when you are making good design, because design is here for us to help solve problems. Cynicism creates problems, usually. Now, you might want to argue with me on this on some philosophical stance, but let's leave that for another day. The next thing I have seen a lot is overconfidence. It's when somebody starts to make a game and they think they're going to make the greatest shit ever, but they kind of at one point eventually fall flat in their face and realize, oh, this might have been too much. I might have overextended myself. I don't think that I used my skills in the proper way. This is perfectly fine. This is perfectly normal. This happens a lot. And it's something that you kind of have to accept that when it happens, but even like as you accept it, you would have to move on from it. And, again, let go of your prejudices and your ingrained beliefs and try to make whatever you're designing into something achievable for yourself, first and foremost, and make it achievable for yourself in a way that you don't go in just gung-ho, just diving in head first, but you make calculated decisions on what you want to achieve and how you are going to do it. And lastly, there's a phenomenon that I like to call the mind prison. And this can mean a lot of things, depending on how you want to interpret it. But I interpret it as follows. You are in a mind prison if you are stuck in a certain way of thinking. And let's go a little bit into that, because that's going to be quite important as we go further into this workshop. So let's define the mind prison itself, what it means to me, and hopefully you will understand the definition. It's the feeling of being stuck. It's the feeling of having painted yourself into a corner and having no way out of that corner unless you want to get paint on your boots. It's the feeling that you're doing everything right, but at the same time also the feeling that you're doing everything wrong because nothing actually works out. It's the feeling that nothing really feels particularly new or interesting or exciting, and all of that leads to a lack and a loss of nuance. So if you are in a kind of mind prison, you are in a thought loop. You have convinced yourself, for example, that this feature is the best stuff ever and it's going to make the game so much better because of some arbitrary reason. The way we go into these mind prisons is that we invent for ourselves a, how do I put it, a self-defining principle, so that you believe something and you define that belief based on just, saying it out loud, basically. You are working in a circle and you are walking in a circle in your mind. And we can get there from a lot of places. We can get there by listening to our idols from their GDC talks, for example. We can have survivorship bias easily, like I tried it, so this works. And I know that it works because it worked for me, for example. That's a good mind prison to find yourself in. Well, not a good one, actually. But the most important thing to acknowledge to yourself is that you are walking in this sort of a loop, that you need to have a different kind of perspective. And I'm not going to give you like this kind of weird matrix free your mind bullshit where it's just like, just think differently, We're not going to do that today. I'm going to give you some examples on how to break your own beliefs and give you some specific steps on what to try to get out from a place when you are stuck. Because when you are designing a game, you are essentially, it's a game for you as well. You need to learn how to put yourself into the shoes of the player. You need to enjoy the game itself and enjoy making it, because otherwise you're gonna get wrecked. And if you're working on a game that you truly care for, you might end up in a place where you look at what you've done and you think it's, oh my god, okay, so this is complete trash. I don't want to do this. This was a bad idea, etc. And you might be right, but you might also be wrong, because you might have been thinking about your game for a little bit too long and losing the objective sight of how your game could actually be perceived by the people who are supposed to be playing it, your players, your end users, your customers. So how do we break out of these thought loops? Well, mother... Okay, so this slide is a little bit weird because the little bullet points were supposed to be in a single line. So this is a perfect example of things aren't going to go as you expect in game development. It also isn't going to go as you expect when making a slide kit. So one of the most basic steps that you should be doing when you are designing your game are as follows. First off, be mindful of your own design process. Try to understand what gets you to leap from one idea to the next, and try to feel out when you are thinking about your game. Think about from whose perspective are you designing this game? Are you designing it from your own perspective, or are you thinking at all times about the target audience? Secondly, be open to any and all kinds of feedback. And that this doesn't go to say that you should accept abuse by people saying your game is trash and whatever. Just disregard any sort of hostile or personal attack. What I mean here is that when people have something to say about your game, try to listen to it. Even if they say that your game is boring, even if they say that your game feels uninteresting or it feels clunky, this is all valid. They're not attacking you. They're not attacking you as a person. They're giving their thoughts about what you are doing. They're talking about your game, your project. Third, write everything down that you do, because our memories are pretty fallible as humans, and we have these neat things called computers, and we should be using them to our advantage. if you are making a decision on your game, if you're designing a mechanic or a feature, then write it down, and also write down how you kind of got to that place, even if it's just vaguely, you know. Think about like what led you to that idea, what made it look like a good idea to implement this feature, for example. Fourth, question your beliefs at all times. This is like one of the best techniques to kind of stay out of your mind prison, is that allow yourself to be wrong. Test things out. Have other people's, you know, validate your ideas or topple them over. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make a mistake. Like nothing is ever going to go the way you want to in game development. Then fifth, try to distance yourself from your work regularly. If you laser focus on your projects and you work with them day in, day out, and you even like somehow, let's say you manage to work on them like 10, 12 hours a day, it's a good idea to take breaks, because otherwise you might get stuck in a way of thinking like, I gotta get this to work, I gotta get this feature to work, but at the same time, maybe you should be asking yourself, should this feature be here in the first place? And finally, definitely, when you are thinking about design, especially when it comes to like game mechanics and other features or pieces of content, avoid thinking of these things as dumb. Like, let's say when you think that you're playing a game and you feel like, oh, this mechanic is kind of weird, like why would the devs ever do this? It feels stupid, it feels dumb, right? But probably they had a good reason of doing this. They probably had a cognitive, like an actual decision, you know, a conscious decision leading them up to this moment. Like, okay, let's make this feature, right? And this goes for your own design as well. Whenever you make something and it doesn't really work out that way, you know, don't call it dumb. Just try to see why you came up with it in the first place and try to see if you can somehow make it better. So what about these modern problems that we saw Dave Chappelle bring up in the previous slide? Like, what would some of these problems be when I am designing a game? Well, let's see. I'm going to talk to you about 5 main problems that I've experienced, and I've seen other people experience during their game development careers. Some of them might be familiar to you, some of them less so, but if you stay in the industry long enough, I would dare say that you will always end up with some of these problems during your projects. First problem, my game isn't fun and or feels boring. So this can mean like anything from the mechanics are bad, the movement logic is bad. If you have like free movement, the game looks bland. It kind of has, you know, it's not visually very pleasing or aesthetically very pleasing. It just feels, you know, like it's not that special. Like this is the kind of problem that I'm talking about here. And it can be, it's a little vague, but I'm going to talk about some specific examples as we go by. Secondly, this feature, or my feature in this game, doesn't fit into any of the gameplay loops or the content set that I have made for this game. So whenever you feel like you added something into the game, and like on paper, when you designed it, when you thought like, okay, I think this dude, like, definitely, like, I should give the player a jetpack, because I mean, it makes sense, like, in the world building and everything, but it might break all of your existing gameplay loops. It might be, like, completely abusable somehow. You might think, like, oh no, all of my precious balance work is now ruined. Like, what do I do then? That's the kind of problem like we're talking about here. Third, my game feels too short, or my game feels too long. Now, this is something that you will always end up thinking about when you're making a game. Like, am I giving enough content to the player? Just like I think yesterday, Death and Taxes got a review, and it was a negative review, and the review only contained one word, and it was boring. And this mostly goes into the first point, but we've also had like reviews that say like too short. Like some reviews even say like, it's kind of too long. So you never know how your audience is going to react. But whenever you throw out the game like as a demo or something for people to play around with, then you should be thinking like, what is the experience they should be having, and are they having it in the proper amount of time? Fourth, my game isn't coming together the way I imagined. And this is getting a little bit real now. When you're making a game, then you will always have these moments of when you're not, you're thinking like, I thought this would go differently. I thought this would be easier. These are the kinds of things I'm going to be talking about. And now let's go straight into the darkness with the last problem. I'm losing or have lost all motivation to work on my game. Now, this probably goes without saying. This is a problem that all of us can face with, like, absolutely because of different reasons in our lives. And I will also try and offer some solutions for this. So, without further ado, first problem. But before we do that, I also want to categorize the approaches that you can take as external and internal. We're humans, we like to group things up. It makes things easier to understand. So hopefully this will make things a little bit easier to understand for you as well. So what do I mean by external and internal methods? Internal methods are things you can do that extend from your own vision and things you have direct control over. So you have full agency there. And external things are stuff you can do like where you involve other people. And it's usually about letting go of this kind of creative control. It's like you can always work on your game like forever without showing it to anyone. And when you release it, then you might be in for a bad surprise because your target audience might not react to it the way you intended to or supposed that they would. So let's start out with freeing our minds, shall we? And it's okay to, make mistakes and not, succeed in the first time. It's okay to let projects die. It's okay to let stuff go. But let's try and see what we can do with the 5 problems that I have postulated today. First off, my game isn't fun and or feels boring. The first thing you can do about yourself when you feel this kind of thought in your head brewing is you should be excited about your ideas. This might be easier said than done, but when you're working on your game ideas, try and find stuff that only you could come up with as a person. Everybody alive today has their own unique experiences. And try to find the uniqueness in your own experiences and your own ideas. It doesn't have to be like fully original. It can be like a Mario clone, but try to put your own kind of like special sauce into it. Speaking of Mario clones and special sauce, like for example, Celeste. It's a great platformer game, obviously inspired by old platformer games like Mario. Crisp movement, great control, and it's something that only those people making that game could come up with, and they laser focused on that. Secondly, figure out your game's core idea and theme if you haven't yet, and make sure that everything that you're designing for that game is in accordance and in harmony with that core idea and or theme. If you are making a game, for example, just wild example out there, making a game about being the Grim Reaper on an office job, then everything you do in that game should be focusing the player on this thematic, on what's happening in the world. Like you are the Grim Reaper, so what do? You judge people who live or die. Okay, that's cool. Like, so what else do you do? Well, you better be prepared to deal with the consequences of your choices, right? So you just kind of build up on that and make sure that everything you add to your game supports the original vision. Thirdly, just apply basic design principles. You can go out. Well, actually, no, sorry, you can't go out. You can go on Amazon and buy an ebook about game design and read up on how interactive fiction and gameplay and gamification works. Like, for example, it's very common for games to feel boring if you don't feel like you're being rewarded for them. Are you maybe missing some rewards from your game? Have you, for example, missed something crucial for your game? Like, are you maybe not giving your player enough feedback about what should be happening? Then we go to the external factors. Ask your friends what feels wrong or what feels off about your game, and ask specific questions. Don't ask questions like, so how did you like the game? Like, how did you enjoy playing it? No, like, ask literally stuff like, how does the movement feel? How do you like the art style? Do you like this design of the enemy? Do you think this game is fair to you? Do you think there could be something improved with, like, the gun that you have, for example, as a player? Ask specific questions of how to improve stuff, and also ask about stuff what feels good. Ask about stuff what feels good so you can focus on that and polish it later. Next, ask professionals for this kind of advice as well, and let them be as honest as they possibly can. Ask people in this Discord channel, ask people on, I don't want to say like game dev Facebook groups because those are a cesspit, but like ask people on, for example, Twitter, or people people you have contacts with, or make new contacts and try to get some honest feedback from them. And finally, definitely not least, consider what your target audience might be experiencing when they are playing this game. Because your experience of like, damn, my game really isn't that fun, but if you're making a game for a target audience who is not you, maybe your game actually is fun for them. And if it's boring for them, well, then you definitely need to do something differently. But just figure out like what your audience would expect. So let's give some anecdotal examples because everybody loves those. First off, The Sims 4. So one of the biggest public criticisms about Sims 4 is that you don't really have any challenge in the game. And if you don't have any challenge in the game, then you don't really have any rewards either. So for example, a while ago, they released this content pack where you could just get your Sims to go and climb a mountain. And, you could buy some really expensive climbing equipment for your Sims and, train them or something. But that didn't actually matter. Like, you could still tell your Sim, climb that mountain, and they would do it, and you would get the achievement, and everything is, like, fine and dandy. But the players, they don't really get anything from that, do they? So that's obviously a problem. And of course, the devs of The Sims 4 made these decisions for a specific reason, so I'm not going to call it dumb, even though I might think it is. They had a specific goal in mind when they took this decision, or it was forced onto them, for example. Next example, Borderlands. If you have heard of this game or the game series, the first Borderlands was actually going to look like something like a crossover between like Killzone, Mad Max, stuff like this. It was kind of like realistic, brown, gritty, and it looked boring. And that's the thing, it looked boring. And they replaced it with a new art style, which is more vibrant. It's cel-shaded, it's a little bit more comic book-like, but it's immediately more recognizable, and they had to throw a lot of assets away. They had a lot of assets made already, and they made this decision because they felt like, oh crap, our game looks boring. That was kind of the feedback they got as well when they showed the game the first times. And this decision paid off. Now it's really iconic. So you might have seen this slide if you've seen one of my previous talks, but probably not. So when you're thinking of like, is my game fun or not, then of course that might be a big surprise. It might tell you that there are some fundamental design problems with your game, and you need to like go back and figure out what your core gameplay loop is going to be, and how maybe your core assumptions about like what's going to be a bit appealing about this game are wrong. But probably the game isn't actually just very well balanced. It's maybe the progression is screwed up. Maybe the rewards aren't coming in for the player, and the challengers aren't challenging enough, for example. And the only way you can figure out this is if you test the game over and over again, and not just by yourself, by letting other people test the game. These are just a few things you can do. Second problem, my feature doesn't seem to fit into any of my gameplay loops or any of my content. The first question that you should be asking yourself is like, should this feature be there? Am I putting it there? Am I putting it in there for a reason? Or is it just like beginning to look like feature creep? Is it adding to the gameplay? Is it adding to the core idea? Or is it not really adding to it, or even worse, taking away from it? The second solution would be to design clear entry points and exit points for this feature. So let's say you have like a skill tree and skill swapping in a hack and slash game. So maybe you don't actually need to, swap your skills all the time live as you're, fighting monsters in this hack and slash game. Maybe you should just, lock in your skills and have a good build, a solid build. And that's it. Like if you go into combat with these skills, then these are the skills you can use until the encounter is over. Maybe you don't need to give the player the freedom to change their skills on the fly, because maybe that detracts from the experience. Like this is just a very simplistic example, but it gets the point across. Third, apply some analogy. Find a similar game to yours. Think about how your features would work there, and figure out like, would this kind of feature actually work in the larger picture, in this genre, or in this type of game that I'm trying to make? Use other examples, try to play similar games and see what they do, and try to understand why they do it. And last but not least, read a book about it. Read a book about designing game mechanics, about what is interesting for the player. How do you modulate risk and reward, for example? Educate yourself. Again, try to see what other people are doing, and like try and figure out what the most important gameplay loops are for you. So let's go back to the hack and slash example. Excuse this amazing diagram. So the left loop would be the core gameplay loop. You kill monsters, you get loot, and you level up. That's the core gameplay loop. That's most hack and slash games. But you have a secondary loop that connects to the core gameplay loop, and you start chaining these. And by entry and exit points, this is exactly what I mean. When you get loot, you have an inventory mechanic and an itemization mechanic, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. So what can I do with this? Well, you can sell it, and then you get gold, and you can then buy other stuff, other equipment to get better at leveling up and killing monsters. So that's like a supplemental loop on the side. And you can have many of these on the side. You can have like a specific like trading mechanic, for example. But these all have to supplement the core game idea and the core gameplay loop. For example, Super Mario, at one point, apparently Mario would have had a gun, for example, or a jetpack. But obviously they cut all of these features because they thought like, okay, yeah, no, like this isn't making the game better, actually. Like it's probably making the game worse. So they just decided to cut back on those features, not implement all of them, and focus on what actually felt good to them. So that's what I will try to emphasize here, is to get you to focus on what feels, let's say, what feeds into the core idea of your game the most. Try to focus on those things, on the very basics. If your game is a lot about moving around, like if you're a racing game or if you're a platformer game, then you gotta focus a lot on just the bare minimum, just controlling your character, controlling the movement of the game. Third problem, my game feels too short or too long. First off, try and think about like what amount of time do you expect people to put into the game? Is it going to be like 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours? That's a lot. Consider if you want to have it replayable. Maybe you can streamline some stuff, maybe cut out some fluff content that doesn't really, doesn't work with the story or doesn't work with the rest of the mechanics. And then, of course, consider the price point at the same time, because value for games is usually judged by the quality you get. Like, you might have a very long game, but if it's just like the same graphics over and over again, the same voice lines over and over again, the same mechanics over and over again, you're maybe not giving the player more of the good stuff. You're maybe just diluting the experience for them. And that brings me to my third point. If you feel like the game is too short, for example, then it's perfectly fine to add some content, but not to make the game longer specifically. You want to give the player a better experience. The "Are you missing rewards" subtitle there is not correct. Just ignore that one. Fourth point. Ask players how much your game is worth. Like whenever you have a playtest session, you can totally ask your playtesters, it's like, how much would you pay for this game? And then you can ask them hypothetical questions like, how much would you pay for it if it cost this? How much would you pay for it if it had this amount of content? If it had like X amount of hours, or 2 new characters in it, or how much would you pay for it if we would cut this kind of content? Ask specific questions here again, and then lastly, check what your competition is doing. Your game might actually be longer than the mean experience, than the median experience of games in this genre, or it might be like shorter, and that might make it even more accessible, because if you make an RPG that's, let's say, 15 hours long, that's pretty reasonable. If you want to make an RPG that's like 60 hours long, well, first off, it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to have to be really good to get people to spend 60 hours in it. So, for example, games that have changed their kind of like time and value proportion is Fortnite. Fortnite started out as a survival crafting game, and then later on they added this battle royale mode. And the initial, like the survival crafter, it was pretty slow. It took a lot of time, and it took a lot of time to like get into it and get good at it. But the battle royale mode was like the length of a match was super short compared to the original idea. It's like you don't play a single game, like you don't set up a server like for Valheim or Rust or something and play for 2 weeks. You play for like half an hour, die, and jump into the next game. So try to focus on the value that you're providing the players and base your decisions on that. Like, do you want to give the players like a great long experience? Then be prepared to match that experience with the quality as well. If you want to give them a short experience, as the saying goes, short but sweet. You don't have to make a long game to make a good game. Fourth problem. My game isn't coming together the way I imagined. This is very common. Things change during development, and this is very normal. Whenever you have this feeling of like, oh, this isn't going as I expected at all, it's like, oh, damn, this like implementing all this multiplayer shit is like killing me. Like, damn, like what is happening? But it might be worth it in the end, because maybe your game shines if it has this multiplayer component. And then the techniques to kind of like check yourself before you wreck yourself is to first off refer to your original vision, or your current vision at least. And if you don't have one, like properly set up and like formulated in words, then write one where you can just like, if you're feeling down, it's like, oh damn, like this is going really strange, like I don't know what's happening. Then just go back to like what you wrote to yourself kind of like months ago, and things like, okay, I wanted to make this kind of game. Am I making this kind of game? Oh yeah, I am. That's great. And if you are not making the game you set out to make, then try to understand why you ended up in this kind of situation. Then secondly, learn to look at raw material in a more objective way. It's again like easier said than done, but if you like see a lot of placeholder assets in your game, it's like, oh damn, I'm never gonna finish this content like ever. Well, it's something that you really have to learn to live with, because the game you're setting out to make is not gonna look like anything you imagined before it's done, before it's completely finished, and it might look like crap if you only have like cylinders and cubes, like pink cubes, just like running around willy-nilly, and that's okay too. Just think about your vision, think like, okay, so when this game is finished, it's gonna look like that. And it's probably not going to look like that. It's probably going to look a little bit different because things change again. But at least give yourself the chance to get to closer to the finish line before you start judging your own creations or your teammates' creations. Like, let them also have a chance to prove themselves. Like, oh, I can make this look good. Thirdly, take some distance. Like artists do when they make visual arts, they try to have a look from close up, like when they're making it, and then take a few steps back and see like, oh, like how does it look at a glance? Like how would this look like at a museum or an art gallery, for example? You can do the same things with your game project. It's like, try to distance yourself a little bit and see the bigger picture. It's like, is it actually coming together? Or are you just trying to make something out of Lego bricks that don't fit together? Then you can understand and identify this problem. Like, is it happening? Fourth, accept the inevitable, that almost nothing that you planned up front is going to work out the way you expected. Things take more time, things take less time, things are more complicated, things might be easier, but it's really, really hard to plan everything ahead. That's basically it. And then if you still feel like, okay, my game is, you're not sure about how it works, then ask the people who have played the game, like, are they enjoying it? Is there something there? Does this game have the X factor, even though it might have like placeholder assets or whatever? Ask them if they are feeling good when they are playing the game, if they're having a fun time. And you might have a surprising answer. It's like, yeah, they are having a good time. It's like, okay, well, we better finish up the game. it's looking good. And then finally, consider a producer or damn it, typos. Consider a producer or producers who are basically there. Like if you would hire a producer for your game, they would be executing your vision. They would be there to, because let's say like you have the creative vision and creative control over the project. If you are in a position where you can hire them, or one of them, it's usually, smaller projects just need one, then try to understand that they're there to help you get out the game you want. That's what they're usually there for. For example, Death and Taxes had this exact problem, so to speak. On the upper row, you can see two pictures from the same kind of like scenes in the game as the ones below, and the ones above are pictures from the game from a long time ago. From a game jam version of the game, and the pictures below are from the released product. Now you can see like there are similarities, obviously, but the game is quite different. Like the first comic was completely scrapped, it was completely remade. The profiles of people, like, it's very different. There's no photos of the case. There's the information about the person is different. There is no information about the family, etc. Like, things do change, but all of this feeds into the original vision. The vision, kind of the overarching vision, stayed the same, but it still ended up as a different game. And the same could be said about Diablo 1, one of my own personal favorite games. It used to be a run-of-the-mill turn-based roguelike game. But one day, one of the coders decided, like, all of my team members are saying, like, maybe this game would be better in real time. And he decided, like, okay, let's just try it. Let's try it. Let's see what happens if we just like have it in real time. Like no turn-based, everything's happening live. Like you just have to react to it. And it worked out great. And it's basically invented a new genre by this single decision. Like I'm not saying like every decision you make will invent a new genre, but you get the idea. So learn to let go of stuff that you have already kind of figured out for yourself, and just try to focus on the stuff that makes the game good, that makes the game work, and don't be afraid to try different things. Finally, fifth problem. I'm losing or have lost all motivation to work on my game. I'm realizing that I'm already been talking for a while and going over the time a little bit, but I hope that with the added commentary it's also interesting for you. First off, if you are feeling you have big motivational problems, you need to take a step back because you might be burning out. This is something that I have struggled with personally. I tend to, be very passionate about the projects that I work on, and that also puts immense strain on myself mentally. Don't burn out. Try to figure out these motivational problems before you get there, and be mindful of your own mental and physical needs. Then secondly, what you want to make isn't necessarily going to be what you need to make. You might want to make the next big hit MMO, but it might not be what you need to make, especially considering for example, your current skill set, your team size, your budget, to actually, let's say, have a full-time game development career with having a nice standard of living. Maybe, tone it down a notch. Try to see what is actually achievable for you, and see what that project or those other projects could teach you first, so that eventually you get to do what you want to do. You might not get there right away, and that's okay. Third, check your scope before you wreck yourself. And this just basically means be mindful of feature creep, be mindful of the stuff you want to add to the game, the extra content. Maybe you want to add another character, another interesting dialogue, another car, another whatever. But again, ask yourself, is this going to be worth it? Is this going to actually make the game better? It might make the game longer, for example, but is it actually going to make the experience any better? And then fourth, seek help if you feel like you are in this kind of a situation where you are just in a black pit of despair. This is very common in game development. You just feel like, oh no, nothing is working out. Everything is crap. I'm doing crap stuff and I am crap. You might have some other problems going on in your life, so you need to be mindful of those as well. You should always figure out what your base needs are when you're working on your projects. Then another thing you can try is to, this goes to all the solo developers out there, you can also try to make games in a team, because this way, if you have a team of like-minded people, you can rely on them and they can also rely on you. And this can be a great motivational factor for you, because if you're working on a feature for 2 weeks and you're talking to nobody else about this thing that you're doing, you might feel pretty alone. You don't need to necessarily form a team, to get over that kind of emotional loneliness and motivational problems, but you should be able to talk to somebody at least, and brainstorm some ideas, bounce some ideas around. And if you are working in a team, well, good for you. Then you can try and motivate each other and complement each other's work. And it's like, oh yeah, this thing you did was really cool. I really like that line of dialogue you wrote there. So yeah, a moment of silence right now for all the game dead projects we have in our hard drives. Okay, that's enough silence. Let's go on. What I'm trying to say is that game development is actually pretty hard. It's very difficult. There's many things that you can't immediately, grasp right away, or how do I put it? Like, things may not be as they seem right away. So try to dream big, but start small. You don't have to go for the biggest game idea, the best thing that you have in your mind. You don't have to go there right away. You can build up to it, build up your skills, build up a team, build up your own confidence, while not being overly confident. Don't assume things. That they're going to work out a certain way, or that they take a certain amount of time, but you can always make an educated guess on how something is going to go. And this is the better solution here. Like, just try and make a guess and treat it as a guess. You don't have to treat it like it's going to be, like, this is how it's going to go down. This is how it's going to happen. This is how much time it's going to take. That's basically setting yourself up for disappointment. Then embrace all the changes that are going to happen, but do keep your vision of what you want to achieve with the game that you're making, with what you are trying to say to the world, if anything, or if you want to just have, get people to have a good time, then that's your vision. And the answer to, pretty much every question that I feel like I'm going to get, like after I end this talk, is going to be, it depends, because it does depend. It depends. Everything that I just said previously is going to depend on your own personal experiences, on your own personal project, and the way you are used to working. So keep an open mind when you are trying to identify design problems in your games. And finally, going back to the beginning, so how do we stop locking the door behind us? And how do we stop painting ourselves into corners? Try to ask yourself every time that you're going to add something into the game or build on an idea, ask yourself, is this worth adding to the game, or is this worth taking away? Ask yourself if this game is worth doing in the first place. And these are all tough questions, but you need to know you need to know when to let go of certain things. You might have a really cool game idea that when you actually try and make it and implement it, you see like, okay, this is not working. And it's okay to step back and shelve it, come back to it later when you're more experienced or you have better ideas. And, all of this takes time. Definitely listen to any kind of feedback you can get and actively ask people for feedback. This might seem like a very, elementary thing to do, but a lot of people need to hear this. It's better to show your project to other people sooner than later, because otherwise, again, you might be setting yourself up for some big disappointment. And thirdly, don't, cram all the stuff that you want into your first game project, for example, or even your first few game projects. Don't let feature creep overwhelm you and get you in a place where just adding stuff instead of finishing the game. Try to finish games instead of making them bigger. This way, you can always make a sequel. And lastly, try and be as honest as possible with yourself, with other people when you're talking about your game, and be prepared to doubt your own decisions. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to, how do I put it? Like, it's okay to go back to the drawing board and see like, okay, so this didn't work. How we can try and figure out how we can fix this. And what I want to tell you all that you've come this far, every experience you've had thus far in your game development career or game development hobby, you already have the experiences you have right now, and you can only choose to build on top of those and keep learning and keep making mistakes, keep having success. Like, all of this is going to be a huge roller coaster, but you definitely need to applaud yourself for getting to where you are right now. And all of the problems that I mentioned, the 5 problems and the potential solutions, try and apply these questions and principles that I lined out to your own game project or your game projects that you're working on right now, and try to see, like, can you identify some problems with it? Maybe you can find out a different way or different angle of thinking about things, and perhaps that will make you appreciate your own work or the work of others a little bit more. And totally ran over the time limit. I hope that's okay. Thank you for your attention so far. And if anybody has any questions at all, then feel free to ask. Wow, there's a lot of people here. Holy mother of God. You can ask them, you can just unmute and ask, or write them in the APT Game Generator channel, however you want.
Okay, I'll just go first because system is, it's hard to decide who gets to ask first.
Yeah.
You mentioned game loops, and also books. So bringing these two things together, do you have a good book recommendation on designing solid game loops?
Yeah, I would recommend, like, it's not necessarily specifically about designing game loops, but it does go over the fact that they exist and they are important. It's called The Book of Lenses. This is very good.
Okay.
Let me quickly escape the hell that is the slideshow here. Book of Lenses, Game Design, The Art of Game Design. I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, I was just typing it up.
Yeah, so this is, well, it's a really good book, and it really does start from the very basics. I've seen this book in a lot of places, in a lot of offices, in different countries, in different game companies, and different people recommending it. And it is a good one.
Okay, so a general recommendation.
Yes.
What else? Like your top 3 books for a general recommendation?
Oh, so do you mean like game design generally?
Yeah,
man.
Game design, like.
It's hard to recall.
Not the art of failure and stuff.
Yeah, no.
That's like top 3 whenever.
This would be the top 1 for sure, but there was. I can't, like, I'm bad with titles of books. I can't come up with any right now, but I can write them if I find them later on into the Facebook comments. I'll just make a note for myself. Top 3 game design books for Margus.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes.
Can you give an example of where it was emotionally really hard for you to cut a feature, and how did it turn out in the end?
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's see. Well, there are a couple of examples, but I have a very strong and kind of like fond memory of working on Heroes of Might and Magic 7. And I was working there as a programmer, but being the obsessive nerd that I am, I basically barged in on every design discussion ever on that game because they allowed that to happen and they were okay with it. There were several features that were cut from the game that would have, in my opinion, made it far better than it could have been. One of my own like personal a feature that I was personally involved in, I was coding the AI for the game in the end, and we didn't we kind of made the decision to not have an overlord AI. So basically that would mean that you have a single entity, a big brain entity who would make like long-term and overarching decisions. What we had was that if you are familiar with the Heroes of Might and Magic series, there are heroes and there are castles. Two specific entities in the game that you have under your command. Castles produce units, heroes tow around those units into battles. And we decided that, yeah, we're not going to have this like overlord type AI. Every castle and every hero is going to think for themselves and try and work with each other for the optimal results. Now, looking back, this was the worst decision ever. But it was also done to save time because the system had already been, developed for this type of, how do I say, like this dichotomy. It's like you have heroes and you have castles, and each of them is one agent, one artificial intelligence agent, and it's going to think for itself. And that's definitely something that I didn't really want to let go of immediately, but I was like, oh no, I'll make it work. I'll make it work with the agents. Spoiler, I didn't make it work. It didn't go as well as I would have wanted to. Then there have been a couple of like pet projects that I've had that I haven't really released, but like that I've been working on for a long time. And usually I really like making simulation games, like games that are, simulating like a society or something like this. And when I make these types of games, then it's extremely hard for me to let go of this, like the trying to be very real, trying to get the simulation to be as close to like real life or fantasy life as close as possible. And the first time I made this decision, I was like, fuck yeah, I mean, I can't do it like right now. Even like I probably could if I had like infinity time, but I don't. So that's the kind of the point where I started having more abstract and simplified simulations in my own like personal projects. It's like trying to make things more simplified and more streamlined, and that has always been like a learning experience for me to kind of like try and let go of that. It's like it doesn't have to be real, it has to feel real. Like the player isn't going to know what's happening in the background. I do. And I shouldn't be thinking about how I'm seeing the game. I should be thinking how the player is seeing the game. And that was a pretty difficult pill to swallow, but here we are.
Yeah, thanks. The last one was actually very useful.
Yeah, no problem. Yep. Any more questions? If you have any questions, just feel free to like unmute or write your question again in the APT Game Generator channel. Okay. If you do have any questions that you come up with after we end the session, then don't hesitate to contact me here on Discord. Just at me, DM me, whatever. Write to me on Facebook. I'm here. It's a difficult topic because how to design games, how to approach the design process, and how to throw away stuff you have already made without feeling bad. And I can tell you this, that maybe this suggestion will be useful to somebody, is that again, if you are making a game, then one of the worst things you can do to yourself is to latch on to what is called the sunk cost fallacy. It's like, I've already put so much work and effort into it, it would be a shame to throw it all away. It's actually very good to throw things away if you see they're holding the game back, if they're holding you back, if you're working on something for so long and you're like, well, this isn't working at all, but you still try and make it work. It's okay to go back to the drawing board. It's like, even if you have made some, like, a bunch of cool art assets, it's like a lot of the stuff that people make don't really end up in the final product, in the final game, in the final version of the game. It's okay to just trash stuff and either use them later on in another project, and like letting go of this kind of stuff might actually make the game better, and it might make it easier for you as a developer to get the game over the finish line. Yeah. If people don't have any more questions, then thank you very much for tuning in. Like and subscribe to APT Game Generator's YouTube channel, which I will link sometime, and I will put the talk up there very soon. But let me just, YouTube APT Game Generator. Let me just put the channel, whoop, wrong page. Let me just put it into here. So I will upload the video there soonish, sometime. And yeah, thank you again for your attention. If you have any more questions, just don't hesitate to reach out. I hope it has been helpful.
Thanks.